Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone's had a good day. It's a little bit after 10:30. It's time for the Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee to get started. Kyle, if you would, please take the roll.
Representative Fritz. Chairman Grills.
Here.
Representative Halsey. Representative Jones. Representative Reedy. Representative Shaw. Representative Todd. Representative Travis. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Kyle. If everyone would, please stand. Our friend, Reverend Johnny Shaw, Representative Shaw, is going to lead us in the prayer and the pledge. Thank you.
Let us all bow. One day, as the disciples were passing, they saw Jesus praying, and they were impressed with his prayer. And they said, Lord, teach us to pray. And he said, when you pray, say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. God, today, as we thank you for this gracious and wonderful day, this is our wish, that your will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. For that, we will ever praise you and thank you for, as we ask your blessings on this committee, on all of our members and visitors today that's here with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Do I? Okay. Right off the bat, I want to recognize that Chairman Darby is excused today. He has family issues he had to take care of, and he'll be back later. But he has made the appropriate process, and he let us know. So hope he gets back safely. We're going to go out of order without out of order. We're going to go out of session without objection, and recognize Matt Fennell for a personal order. Matt Fennell, if you would, please come up and explain. Matt Fennell works for Tennessee Farm Bureau, and he is the responsible for AgStar and the group that was with him. So I've asked him just to quickly introduce the people that's with him and give a short summary of what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. It's an honor and privilege to talk to you all. I'm here with a coworker for a couple of days in town. We're making some legislative visits as part of our annual trip from our AgStar Leadership Program. Our AgStar Leadership Group is a group that from West Tennessee, to my knowledge, it's the only adult leadership program of its kind that focuses 100% strictly on agriculture and development of agriculture leaders from our region. So Representative Shaw, you're probably very familiar with it because we've come visited with your office a number of years. I think we're in about year 23 or 24 of this program, and it's sponsored by Tennessee Farm Bureau as primary sponsor, with support from West Tennessee Leadership Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit group there in West Tennessee, as well as some of our partners with Tennessee Farmers Co-op, Farm Credit, and Extension Service of the Western region are also big supporters. So it takes a lot of people to make this work, but it is an extremely beneficial group. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all. As you know, West Tennessee is sort of the breadbasket of agriculture for the state. Thank you. Five of the top ag producing counties in the state are found in those 21 county areas, and 9 of the top 15. And so the group that I'm going to ask them to stand as I call their name is a good representation of that group. So we've got Derek Brasher, who works for NRCS out of Decatur County. Ms. Cameron Tyler, who is UT Extension 4-H agent in Chester County. Dre Funk, who is NRCS agent and works in Obion and Lake counties. And Christian Ransom works in Lauderdale County, NRCS. And we have Jared Strickland, who's an ag extension agent in Hardeman County. Mr. Clay Perkins, who works for Helena as a technical development manager in Memphis and originally from Dyer County. And then last but not least is Drew Denton. And Drew works with the West Tennessee Research and Education Center in Jackson. He's out of Hardeman County. And also traveling with us is a brand new coworker that I have at Tennessee Farm Bureau, Miss Libby Wilson, originally from Humphreys County and a new resident in Camden. So Chairman Grills, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here and introducing them. Without objection, we'll go back into session. Are there any personal orders, Representative Travis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to go back to 2012 when Kent Calfee came and I came to this legislative body. And with Kent and with me, I brought Laura, and Kent brought Marilyn, who we all fell in love with. And Marilyn, we're glad to have you here today. Thank you.
It is good to see you. Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and recognize the rest of Leadership Rome that's with us here today. If you'll give them a big warm welcome, please.
Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two doctors here that are from my neck of the woods and good friends of mine, Doc Sibley and Doc Perry are here, and a couple of other friends with them, and I appreciate them making the trip down. I'm glad you're here.
Y'all stay tuned. I think we'll hear from them in a little while. Any other personal orders? Seeing none. Tyler, you got any wisdom for us today?
Good morning, everyone. With March being Women's History Month, I thought we would go with the Queen of Rock and Roll herself, Tina Turner. I believe that if you'll just stand up and go, life will open up for you. Y'all have a great day.
Seeing no more personal orders, we'll get right into the calendar, and right on the top of our list is House Bill 2299 by Chairman Dan Howe. You have a motion and a second. You're properly before the committee. Do you have an amendment for this bill?
I believe I do. It makes the bill. Drafting code 12344.
Hold on. We do not have an amendment on that, Chairman Howe, but we are trying to find one.
That's the only one I have. It makes the bill.
You what? We do not have an amendment for this bill, but go ahead and introduce the bill, and we'll talk about that as we're.
Okay, I'll be glad to make a copy of this and give it to you.
Yes, please.
But I have drafting code 012344. The amendment makes the bill. Unfortunately, you don't have it, but I'll be glad to talk about it.
Can we roll you one space and see if we can get this worked out?
Absolutely.
Yes, we'll do that.
That'd
We'll
be
roll-
better. Thank you so much.
Roll one space. Chairman Haston is not here. Roll to the hill. That brings Chairman Howe back. Roll you another space. Representative Hill is not here. It's been taken off notice because I should have dealt with that right off the bat. Representative Hill's 2858 has been taken off notice. It's off notice. House Bill 1451 by Chairman Faison has been rolled 1 week. Now we are back to 2801. That is the next bill, and you're right after 2801, Chairman Howe. You're more than welcome to, Chairman Halsey. We have a motion. We have a second. You're properly before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. This bill is pretty simple, doesn't have any amendments to it. It just says that folks in this state who raise some pork or cattle or chickens, small time, who have never used any form of a vaccine. There's not a lot of them, but there are some. Where I live, there are some small Mennonite farmers who produce corn that is not genetically modified. It's not hybrids. It's straight corn. And they feed that to some of their cattle, and there's not a lot of cattle, and there's not a lot of hogs that they raise. But they've never vaccinated. They actually have a conviction about it. It's part of their conscience, and they work on raising animals that develop a natural immunity. And this bill says that with those folks who have never vaccinated, that the Commissioner of Ag nor the state vet could force them to vaccinate if they have never vaccinated before. And that's what the bill entails.
Thank you for that description. Yes, sir. Representative Shaw, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Presenter, I'm trying to get my head around this. So it doesn't matter what happened to this animal, whether it gets sick or whatever, they would not, if they chose not to, they would not have to get it vaccinated. Is that what I'm understanding?
Chairman Halsey, you're recognized.
That's correct. It's completely their choice. The animals are their personal property, and if they choose not to vaccinate, they don't vaccinate. But this bill just says they can't be forced to vaccinate if they have never vaccinated before.
Representative Shaw,
Would that be animal cruelty?
Chairman Halsey.
Well, I don't think so. They raise pretty dadgum healthy animals.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Well, but you just said if they've never been, and if they are among, well, if they've never been vaccinated, then they're probably their immune system is subject to pick up something. Would they want to eat that animal if that animal was sick and died and never been vaccinated?
Chairman Halsey.
I really don't know the answer to that about consuming the food if it was sick and died. I don't really have the answer to that. But they raise, for example, they raise fryers. They don't vaccinate them. They raise their fryers to butcher, to eat. And some of them have laying hens and they sell the eggs, and people come, the neighbors come and buy the eggs because they know they've never been fed genetically altered food and they haven't been vaccinated, and that's what they like. But these are not big time market people. They're just folks that don't like to vaccinate, and they don't, and they never have.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Well, you know, I remember coming up, we probably didn't either because we didn't know. But I think, you know, if an animal needs to be vaccinated, to me, it would be a cruelty not to have a mix with the other ones who might get sick as well. I don't know, somehow or another, this seemed like that is not a good idea. I understand what you're saying, but I think we got a health issue here more than anything, not just to animal cruelty, but a health issue. So I honestly can't support a bill like that. I just think that's not humane. But thank you for explaining that. Thank you.
Representative Halsey.
One of the things you said, that they're not mixed with other animals. I mean, other than on that local place, they don't. This stays right there on their property. They don't move them anyplace else.
Representative Travis.
Thank you, sir. And the representative and I talked on that this morning, and me having cattle too, I don't vaccinate my cattle. But we don't have a law in Tennessee that says we have to vaccinate animals, is there?
Chairman Halsey.
No, there isn't. There is a provision, though, that if the state veterinarian or the Commissioner of Agriculture sees a need because of some impending threat, that they can force it.
Representative Travis.
Okay, so an impending threat, that would be a disease or something that comes across the state of Tennessee into the farmland. And I want to go to that right there. Let me get my head around that. So if there is a bad disease that come and affects cattle and it's killing cattle across the state of Tennessee, and the veterinarian says that, hey, to do this, we have to have this vaccine to keep these cattle. So that would affect, this bill would affect that from happening. So your group of people wouldn't vaccinate their cattle, in turn, maybe give it to other cattle around, or no?
Chairman Halsey.
No, this bill wouldn't affect all the cattle growers in this state, and particularly big producers, because they all vaccinate. This would, yes, part of what you said is exactly correct. Some little farmer that's got 5 cattle and 100 chickens and 2 pigs, and he's never vaccinated, this bill would say you can't force him to vaccinate his. Now, of course, all the other ones that are vaccinated, if the vaccine works, then it wouldn't affect the cattle across the state of Tennessee. It would only affect this boys if he got it.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Jones. And just so y'all know, we do have Dr. Samantha Beatty here from Tennessee Department of Agriculture that could possibly be a witness if y'all would like to bring her up at some time. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
That was exactly my question. I was going to see if we could hear from the department and ask a few questions.
That's fine. Is there any objection to having Dr. Beatty come up at this point? Without objection, we'll go out of session and have Dr. Beatty come forward. Fresh from Knoxville last night. She drove in just so she'd come talk to us. If you would, please state your name, and you have 3 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll give you a few questions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Samantha Beatty. I am Tennessee State Veterinarian. So I'm a producer as well as a state veterinarian. I can see this from a perspective of somebody who owns cattle. I have owned goats. I have a few chickens, but my husband and I are passionate about agriculture. We love agriculture. We want to see ag industry thrive. And so the reason that this is important is it's not about me, Samantha Beatty, having the authority to order a vaccine. It's about the state veterinarian, whoever that may be in 10 years or 15 years, having that ability. And the reason we do it is to try to get in front of those diseases that could be devastating to our whole continent or to our whole region. And so I would show you an example of what we call a control zone. This is an infected zone in the middle. This is the buffer zone here, and this is the surveillance zone. And if you're plotting poultry premises in any point in location in a state, this is where they are. If you see that, I mean, that's over 100 dots, right? And so those are people with poultry premises. What happens when we have a disease outbreak is that our exports to other states and other countries from that zone immediately stop. And there are some guidance recommendations laid out by USDA that say, okay, the state veterinarian is going to put a control zone around that area, and there will be testing protocols. And if we want to do vaccines, it would be a joint. I don't make that decision by myself. I don't have an aha moment. It's in conjunction with our federal veterinarians, with industry. We have some industries that don't want to vaccinate. I don't have anything to do with routine management vaccines. I'm a firm believer that if you don't want to vaccinate for blackleg and you have a cow die from blackleg, that's your consequence, right? I don't enforce those things. The state veterinarian only needs this in the event that we're looking at a catastrophic disease that could devastate our industry. If we're the only state that doesn't vaccinate, or we're in a region where we don't vaccinate, and again, I go back to pigs, about 36 states in one country ship pigs to us every day. So let's say that we'll use our friends Georgia and Florida as the infected states, right? So all of these states around it may be, so the control zone can be anything. It could be a state, it could be a county. All the states around it, it could be your buffer zone or your surveillance zone. So there would be movement controls out of here. The minute we say we don't vaccinate and we're going to ship cattle, Kansas is going to say, nah, I don't want your cows. And that's how it works, literally. So during bird flu, another veterinarian from a state will call me and say, tell me about this farm. What's their biosecurity plan? Have they tested 6 times in the last 4 days? Whatever that looks like, the requirements for movement. And I'll say, I've assessed their biosecurity plan. They're good to move. I can give you a pretty good guarantee that they're following all the guidance that's been laid out for us. We also use this information for export. Our federal partners in trade use our response to, Thank you.
Does anybody have a question before your time is up? Did we have? Representative Jones?
Could you finish explaining
Thank
what you just started to say?
Yeah, so everything that we do in a response, we document down to like who crosses into the infected premises. It's very meticulous. It's very well organized. And so our federal trade officials use that data and they say, look, our states all respond the same way. we have them all testing the same way. It gives us validity. It gives us credibility on the international stage. So not only are we protecting local trade, we're protecting international trade. Because if my cows are vaccinated according to an order and my neighbor doesn't, my cows are still going to have to meet a higher metric. It's kind of like TSA pre-check, right? Like you still have to be checked, but you've met a higher bar. Instead of having to jump through as many hoops. That may be not a good analogy, but it is a protection for our industry. And it's protecting a way of life because our food supply is so critical and it's so important. And so if we don't vaccinate and we have animals that actually hold the disease endemically, we may, devastate generations of animals.
Representative Jones? Yeah. Okay. We have any other questions, Dr. Beatty? Representative Travis?
Yes, Doctor. In the state of Tennessee, have we ever applied this rule with the veterinarians?
Before I was ever a veterinarian. So that's been a long time ago. Brucellosis, if you're familiar with that. So brucellosis is bangs. People talk about being banged out. So brucellosis is an obligate bacteria that's zoonotic to people, causes reproductive issues, chronic arthritis, lots of inflammation. It's a terrible disease. You find it in milk, meat, and that sort of thing. So when it's been eradicated here in our domestic population, but we are still surveilling for it. When I was a young veterinarian working in the stockyards, we tested every cow that came through. We don't have to do that anymore because we've eradicated the disease. But if we had a pocket pop up, we would probably want to start having people around the origin of that animal either start testing or vaccinate. And again, it's made with epidemiology in mind. It's not a spur of the moment decision. It would be sitting down with a large group of people because when we vaccinate, our trade partners notice. Every time we do something that makes the news, somebody in Japan or somebody in China is watching it and they're like, why did they vaccinate those animals? And so it's not a decision that's taken lightly. It's never part of the routine day-to-day business of the state veterinarian's office to interfere with management practices. A disease that came on our radar recently, Theileria from ticks. We had the opportunity to regulate that. That is not something that I want to regulate because the moment that we make it, we flag it, our trade partners out in the Midwest will say, you know what, we don't want your cows. And that's exactly what they did to some other folks. They will not take those animals because they don't have that disease yet. So it's really a balance. It's a lot of layers of decision making, and it's in an effort to try to keep the disease from becoming endemic, to stamp it out and protect our food supply.
Representative Travis, follow up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yeah, one more follow-up on that. The states that surround us, these still have this alarm bell or whatever you guys call that?
Yes.
So all the states that surround us, what that map?
Well, and so, yeah, so like I talk to my colleagues in the other state animal health officials pretty frequently. And one of them is, I spoke with one yesterday, like what would the impact of this bill be to us? And as a region, it could be quite devastating because if someone has a disease, and granted, we think about it being on a small piece of property, but disease moves so quickly. Tires, wind, vectors, in little ways that we can't always contain. And so, it would essentially keep them at risk. And then we have a regional issue where we have a product that we can't get to finish because one person will impact the ability of other people to move. So it's about keeping us in commerce, at the speed of commerce.
Representative Travis, one more follow-up.
Yeah, one more. So I committed myself when I started that I don't vaccinate my cattle right now. So if the commissioner puts out a request that all cattle has to be vaccinated, that means I would have to vaccinate my cattle of 5, even though I don't have cattle around me, but I'm in that big wide circle.
For specific diseases, it wouldn't be for blackleg or lepto or any of those things that you're probably, people are probably doing on a routine basis. The 3 big diseases that we currently think about needing to vaccinate for in an emergency and have actually developed plans for are foot and mouth disease, African swine fever, although there's no vaccine for that yet, it's in development, and high path avian influenza. We're a primary breeder state, and our industry does not want to vaccinate birds. So that would go into consideration, right? If we were trying to manage that disease, but you have to think too about the zoonotic consequences. So there are people dying in Cambodia from H5N1 now, which is the bird flu that we have. And at some point, will we have to consider that? I don't know. It won't be a Samantha Beatty decision. It'll be a Samantha Beatty decision with lots of other people with input.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairman Todd?
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here because this is very important to have your input to this committee for this decision. Thinking about your control zone that you mentioned and thinking about how the vast majority of producers are going to vaccinate. If there's an order or a suggestion to vaccinate, most are going to do that, I would think. So if that happens and we pass this bill into law that says you don't have to, but most would probably say, hey, it's a good idea. I trust you. I trust the data, the statistics, the research. I'm going to vaccinate. But one doesn't in a particular area. How would that affect the rest and why? Because if everybody else is vaccinated, why does this one that's not vaccinated cause a problem?
So these diseases are highly pathogenic. So they move in feces, they move in blood tissues, they move in urine, they move in air. And so the idea is that you have this group of animals that may be exposed, and because they're not vaccinated, they develop fulminant disease. And while we all like to think that vaccines are 100%, we know that they're not. They're a tool to minimize the devastation of a disease. And so you can still get disease in that surrounding area potentially. Wildlife can carry it. We're seeing wildlife move the Asian longhorn tick. I can't stop ticks on foxes. I thought about it, realized it was out of my control. But it's one of those things that there's so many factors, and it's not just the people, but it's also the environment. And so, it's not my decision, right? Because I would be lobbying for you to be able to sell your cows or you to be able to sell your chickens or goats or whatever you have. But it's ultimately up to the receiving state or the receiving country. And they'll perceive that as not playing ball, not being a team member, right? And that's what that perception is that they are not following the guidance. So how could they possibly assure me that there's no disease in this product? So that's essentially that in a nutshell.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. Follow up?
Yes, please. Thank you. So I guess thinking historically in the past, if you recall a particular situation where a vaccination was required in this state or another state, I don't know, has there ever been anything like
No,
that?
sir.
Okay.
Brucellosis vaccine. That's the one I was talking about that happened when I was a young person. Talking like less than 10. We still vaccinated herds around known infected herds to try to reach that status of free. Because what that does, once upon a time, if a state was going to accept animals from a brucellosis infected state, you had to test them all before that state would take them. So that's an added cost to the producer. So if you were going to ship to Michigan or you were going to ship to Alabama, they might say, we have to test everything for brucellosis within 30 days, and we need it on this test chart. And they all have to have a specific ID. And so now, by being a free state, we've eradicated that disease. Animals can move interstate freely.
Thank you. Chairman Todd?
Thank you for that. And that's, you kind of got at what I was trying to determine is historically what has happened. What was the effect? What was the order? What was the effect? And how did it change those populations? As you said, you eradicated that for the most part, I'm sure, as best we can estimate at this time. And just trying to figure out what effect this would have in the future. And so having a producer, if it was just one in an area that said, I'm not going to vaccinate, I can see the ramifications from what the protocols are already in place of how maybe an entire population in a state could not be then moved or sold, certainly across state lines. Does it affect in-state at all? And if that were to happen?
So I apologize. I've got laryngitis. But So we can look at now what has happened with our wildlife population and our captive cervid population. And we do not allow captive cervids to move out of the CWD zone because even the ones that are not susceptible to it can pass it in their feces. And so we don't want the few remaining captive cervid farms that we have to be decimated by that disease because we moved it to them. Now, it may organically get to them because deer move everywhere, right? But within the state, if they're in a control zone, they're still going to have to prove for one of these diseases that I'm talking about, they're still going to have to prove that they're free of disease. And that's by doing, testing so every so often in the matter of 5 days. Something like that.
Thank you. Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time today. And this may be the wrong venue for the question. Maybe some of the folks that raise cattle may know this better. But are there markets for unvaccinated animals in the state or in the U.S. or around the world where the testing could be accomplished and then we could safely ship the meat?
You recognize.
So that would certainly be a local thing, very local. I think that most feed yard owners are going to want an animal who's vaccinated because the stress of moving and being fed is going to create an opportunity for disease. They prefer it actually in all my communication with the Texas cattlemen's, feedlot operators and in other states that have a lot of feed yard stuff. They don't want animals who are not vaccinated because they get about a 10 to 12% death loss on those animals. And then they have to pump a bunch of medicine in them when they get there just to get them to where they'll grow. And so that's a really, if there is a market for somebody who wanted to sell out of their freezer, potentially, we hear about all grass-fed beef, but honestly, it can be a welfare issue, right? I mean, it can be. The reality is that if you have disease all around you and animals have ulcers in their mouth or they have fulminant respiratory disease and they can't breathe, then it is a welfare issue. Because you have people who, and it's about judicious use. It's not an all or nothing. It's judicious use. So.
Thank you for that. I don't have any other people on my list. Seeing no other questions. Thank you. So,
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Todd, we'll give you one more shot.
Thank you. Thank you. And Representative Fritz's question sparked this one. So if you had a producer, again, under this law that did not vaccinate, and let's say it affected a whole population in the state from the standpoint of transport, could we still process the meat in general? You might get some specific type of meat that this might not apply to, and then transport.
FSIS, state meat inspection, if we get that going, which we're working really hard on. So FSIS, animals have to pass an antemortem inspection. They also have to pass a postmortem carcass inspection. And so if any of those fail, that meat is automatically condemned. And so you're looking at a whole carcass being discarded. They'll test for it to make sure that there's nothing that's reportable that we need to address back at a farm, like a brucellosis or a foot and mouth disease. We don't worry about respiratory diseases. We don't worry about blackleg in a carcass. So what I'm saying is it's the extreme diseases. This is the fire extinguisher. This is the fire extinguisher rule that helps us. We don't break it out. We don't even keep it out in public, right? But it's the one that we have to have when we need to break the glass.
All right. There's no other question. Representative Jones?
I was wondering if we could see the exhibits that you were holding up
Sure,
as the
just
committee.
pass them
around. And then
Dr. Beatty, could you email those to each office?
Sure.
Would that be
Is there
sufficient,
somebody
Representative
who's-
Jones?
Does Carol have a list?
Would that be sufficient, Representative Jones?
Yeah.
Okay. Representative Travers?
I wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. You recognized.
So, because I'm just trying to clarify. So what we're seeing with this proposal that we're voting on today is that this is not about routine vaccinations. This is about emergency situations, trying to stop a crisis, trying to protect our state's commerce, and trying to protect something from spreading that we haven't seen since brucellosis or ever. And so right now, you as a state veterinarian, you're not mandating any vaccines of animals. No, okay. And so again, this just seems like, a solution in search of a problem. We don't have any mandated vaccines, but this is for emergency situations. that we haven't seen yet, but that just as a potential? And do you feel like this proposal that the representative is offering may prevent you from sufficiently doing your job in the future if we were to see one of these outbreaks?
You recognize.
I do think that if I were unable to, or any state veterinarian, I don't want to go back to because this is a nationwide deal. If any state veterinarian weren't able to offer these or to order it, I know that that's not a very preferred term, but order it, then I do think that you could see a lot of frustration from producers because we've allowed disease to move. We've impacted their ability to trade. I can't keep them in commerce. And so it essentially does limit my ability to work through a disease outbreak and still keep animals moving if I can.
You recognize.
Do you know any other states where they have limited the state veterinarians' authority in these emergency situations? Do we have any states that have done this?
I would be, I don't know that. I know the states around us, we all are called the Southern Animal Health Association, and we all still have those authorities, those states do. But I have not polled the whole United States.
But none of the surrounding states in the Southeast region?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Representative Travis, we'll give you one more too.
Yeah, one more shot. I want to go back to this, this so-called maybe bad disease that comes that we need to protect. So if I've got my 5 cattle and I don't have any cattle around me and I do not vaccinate my 5 cows when the alarm's been sounded, how does people know that? How do you know that I haven't vaccinated that
You
my
recognize.
group?
So when there's a disease outbreak, we start at the infected premises and we put people on the road. And we knock on doors and we just ask them if they have animals. We don't ask to look at them because we don't want to spread disease. We ask them if they have animals, and we ask them not to move them. And we do place a quarantine because it's much easier to place a quarantine for a few days and get around a disease than it is to wait till the cat's out of the bag and try to chase it down. And so, but how does it impact? It really depends on the size of the control zone. So if you're the only person in a 10-kilometer circle that has animals, it may not impact anybody else. But if it's a statewide control zone, then it's going to have an effect on the whole state. And I don't make the control zones. That's a decision made between the joint commands of a response.
Thank you so much for being here. Just one question for me. Are you adequately funded to administer a program like that? Are you adequately staffed to administer a program if something like that were to break out?
We are more staffed than we have ever been. And it is an amazing thing to see how we are working to respond. We're going to be doing some emergency things. Do I think that it will be seamless? I think the plans are just the plans now, but we're working on some exercises to try to roll that out. Even our federal partners don't have a super clear idea because there's not enough vaccine to go around, right? That's why it would have to be such a narrow window of animals that get vaccinated. So
Thank you for being here today.
thank you, sir.
All right, we'll go back into session. Chairman Hosey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Doc, for being down here. I appreciate you coming all the way from Knoxville. Thank you for being here. You got to understand, these people that I'm talking about that's carved out in this bill, they don't ship cattle. They don't export cattle. They are not big producers. These are people who are small, little teeny operators who their cattle, their chickens, if they raise hogs, don't ever leave their property. The bill's specific to these folks, and it is people who have never vaccinated. They do not do it at all. That's the only people that this bill applies to, and it says they are exempt from being forced to. Now, you got another deal to deal with here, too. It's a bigger issue to me. We just came through 4 years ago of a virus that had a survivability rate of 99.4%. And there was every effort in the world to force people to take a shot they didn't want. I screamed and yelled about that. We all did, actually. And executive branches of government felt like they could make law and force people to take a shot they didn't want. Those principles in my heart are the same here. If I own 2 hogs and 40 chickens, and 2 cows, and I never vaccinate because it's a personal conviction of mine, and I don't do it, our Constitution says state of Tennessee's government would never force somebody to violate their own conscience. But the issue comes down is, whose property is this? It belongs to me. If I've never vaccinated and don't want to vaccinate, then the issue comes, can the state force me to deal with my personal property in a way that I do not want to? That's a much bigger issue to me. These are small little folks who have never vaccinated.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, you're right, but I think that's why so many people died in that virus, number one. But number two, the folks you're talking about couldn't vote for you because they don't vote. You carried a bill for them, but they can't even vote for you. Well, they don't believe in voting. That's my point. We've sat here and we've listened as a group of grown men for a long time, and we've heard from the professional people who would know more about this than we would ever know. And for the life of me, I got a vehicle, and if I don't change the oil in it, I'm gonna drive it to be a wreck. And the same thing about your livestock and your family and everybody else. If you don't take care of them, what do you think's going to happen to them? And I don't think anybody want to make anybody do anything they don't want to do. It's just a public health issue for me to have 50 chickens or 50 hogs or whatever it is, 2 hogs or whatever, and don't take care of them if they need it. Besides, I wouldn't want to eat the meat out of a grocery store. If an animal have not been taken care of and vaccinated, you think I want to go in the store and buy that product and eat it? I think not. I just think it's a little really wild for us to pass a law like this when nobody's mandating anybody to do anything right now. But I think if it came to it where there was a matter of a virus breaking out or whatever the names of those viruses are, we ought to be able to stop them so they don't harm more people than they need to. And well, like I said at first, I'm sure we need to go on, but I just can't support anything like this. I just think that's wrong.
Thank you, Representative Shaw. And I want to echo something he said there. He said he would not want to eat something that had not been vaccinated or whatever. But are there people out there that have that subscribe to a market that say, I would be willing to pay a premium for something that is guaranteed to be unvaccinated? You recognize?
There's a lot of people like that.
So if we were to go in and go down this road and require them, would that affect their market and remove them from a market that they have built or an enterprise they had built?
There are people who raise non-GMO corn, non-genetically changed corn, and another man has 3 hogs and will buy that corn and feed it for that very purpose and then sell that hog to a neighbor or part of that hog to a neighbor, and the neighbor is glad to pay a little extra money knowing that the hog has never been vaccinated. Indeed. It's another issue too that Representative Shaw brought up, and that is when you have an emergency, do your fundamental property rights dissipate?
Representative Fritz, you're recognized. You're next on the list.
Question on the bill.
Question be called on the bill. All in favor of sending House Bill 2801 to full committee, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Let the noes be recognized. If you wish to be a no, be recognized with the clerk. Ayes have it. On the full. Chairman Howell, we come back to you. Greetings once again. We have if we can get a motion in a second, we have a motion and we have a second. He is properly before the committee once again. And I believe what we have is the actual bill drafting number. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's why you and I have such good assistance. They correct us when we make mistakes. Yes,
Sorry about you having
you are correct. That is the actual bill drafting number.
Hope you
And-
enjoyed the entertainment for the last
Well, I was
45
going to
minutes.
say, I'm a farm boy. I was raised on a farm, and I'd forgotten all the things about raising cows and chickens and pigs. I quite enjoyed that.
Great. Go ahead and address your bill if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2299 was sent to me by the Polk County Commission following their vote on a resolution requesting a private act for that county, which would allow the commission to create a ballot initiative in a future election. Now, that ballot initiative, according to the resolution they sent to me, would allow the citizens of Polk County to vote on whether to ban or to approve the use of biosolids as a fertilizer on private land in Polk County. The county resolution was approved by unanimous vote of the commission, and I'm bringing it here today for your consideration.
Chairman Howe, I do have someone on the list that would like to speak on that. Would
Okay.
it be okay with you if we were to allow that individual to go?
Absolutely. Sure.
Mr. Stan Herder, if you would come forward, you have, if you would state your name, you have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and we'll ask a few questions. And is that okay with the committee? We're out of session without objection.
Thank you. I'm Stan Carter, Bradley County, the Dallas, my representative, and I support this legislation and the people of Polk County. It's not a dispute about agricultural waste. It's not nearly as dangerous as urban waste. What's happening is Polk County, the Ocoee River has an invasion of human waste biosolids from Georgia, from Cobb County. They're shipping up tons and tons of poop because it's cheaper to dump it in the old copper mining site that's about a mile up the river. And it's so bad that kids cannot go out to recess if the wind blows to the south. Some of the nice little restaurants on the Ocoee River, people run inside if the air comes down. And the urban poop is a higher class of danger because of all the toxic chemicals and forever chemicals. And as you heard, pathogens pass through feces. So it's a health risk and a harm to the kids. And that's a strong economy for adventure. There's over 1,000 people that work with rafting and restaurants that come from all over America to go there. So we would ask you to support this in order to help Polk County take some action to limit the flow of biosolids from Atlanta. It's like an invasion of harmful pathogens and chemicals, and we need someone to stop it, and they're willing to step forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stan, for being here. Do we have any questions from Mr. Herder?
Very good.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll go back into session without objection. Chairman Howe, you are recognized, and we do have a couple of questions that like to
Sure.
be asked of you, but
Sure.
you have a statement you'd like to make first?
No, I'm at the will of the committee.
Okay, Chairman Todd, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got I guess a few comments and concerns with this. The overarching concern I have is that, especially when biosolids are utilized in agriculture, which is a lot of our purview here, that's already covered in state law. They're protected from that normal agricultural practice being prohibited somewhere by a local municipality or any other entity. So I don't want to go down that road of damaging that law that was established in the 30s to make sure that our food production stays consistent and adequate for our people. I will say in my line of work of hydroseeding, so getting over to the other section of our purview in this committee in the environmental world, we use a number of products, and they're actually becoming more and more popular to replace topsoil, believe it or not, that are very similar to the biosolids you're talking about. They're processed in similar ways, kill all the pathogens. They're very expensive, quite frankly, but they work very well and replace situations where you would normally have to haul in tons and tons of topsoil from somewhere, which in some places is very rare, and in order to grow something, grow grass or other vegetation on property. So it's a very important component in the erosion control world of stabilizing soil so that we don't hinder the normal aquatic processes in the Ocoee River and Tennessee River and all the other streams and water bodies that we have in the state. So I'm very supportive of the use of these products, and I think they have their role. EPA heavily regulates these to make sure that they meet certain qualifications so that they're not producing any kind of harmful effects on the landscape. And I appreciate that. I think the industry has developed along with EPA and state regulations to make sure that there are protections put in place. So I'd be very cautious to step into this arena and do any harm to either the erosion industry that is trying to protect our rivers and streams by putting vegetation on the landscape. I think a gentleman mentioned that an area of, I think an old copper mine. Those are some of the most, I've never worked on mine reclamation very much, but those are some of the most difficult areas to grow any kind of vegetation on. And this is a key component to provide that stabilization. So I can only imagine, I've heard of the damage done to rivers like the Ocoee from those mining operations where they couldn't grow vegetation very well. So I think it practically has the reverse effect to make sure that we can stabilize that soil and not put harmful chemicals and metals, especially heavy metals, into those waters that we all rely on. So I thank you for bringing this, but this is going to be a very difficult one for me to even consider. But I appreciate your sincere work on this, because you've talked to us, you've talked to a number of us about this, how important this is for your community. And we want to make sure that we do the right thing for all of Tennessee, and especially our ag community, but also environmental folks. So the folks that are doing the work in that field. So thank you so much for bringing this up.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. Do you have a response there, Chairman Howe?
No, I appreciate your concern. Again, several people in the Copper Hill area very disturbed about this issue. I received several emails and some very vocal Facebook posts, as some of you experienced yourself on other issues in your community. So I'm bringing this at the behest of the county commission. And again, appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also, and I did overlook this a while ago, Farm Bureau was on this to speak. Would Farm Bureau like to say something? You were on the list, and I'm sorry, I just overlooked it. I need to go right back out of session and give them equal opportunity.
Sure.
So I'm going to go out of session without objection and give them
Yep.
the same time I gave them for.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chairman and committee, and thank you, Chairman Howe. Utmost respect for Chairman Howe, but just to disagree with him on this one. And Chairman Todd did a good job of explaining the regulatory. Oh, sorry, Kevin Hensley, Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation. I'm sorry. Chairman Todd did a great job of explaining the current law around zoning and what that means and the impact of this. And this position has been amplified by multiple court decisions and then also Attorney General's opinions. It brings us to this bill, which would amend the authorizing zoning statute to allow Polk County the ability to regulate the application of biosolids. This is unprecedented in the other 94 counties. Farm Bureau has long held the position that local governments do not and should not have the ability to regulate agricultural practices. Applying biosolids to agricultural fields is a viable alternative to commercial fertilizer. Using biosolids is a much cheaper option than using commercial fertilizer, and also biosolids are domestic. While around half of the nitrogen and nearly 80% of the potash fertilizer used in farms in the U.S. is imported. It's important to note biosolids are heavily regulated by EPA and TDEC, and any sort of stream issues would be regulated by those entities. Farmers in Polk County and across the state have utilized biosolids as a safe and cost-effective fertilizer, especially in light of the dynamic fertilizer prices that we've seen, which are impacted by geopolitical events like the war in Ukraine. Furthermore, biosolids, which are not land applied, would be destined for a landfill. And this committee understands better than most the magnitude of that situation that we're facing when it comes to landfills and the consequences of diverting what otherwise would be quality fertilizer to a landfill. In order to ensure food security and thriving local farms and development of a local patchwork of regulatory burdens from county to county is something we can't support, and it's just not sound public policy. So we're very, very opposed to the legislation.
Thank you for that. I don't see any questions for you, but thank you so much for being
Thank
here,
you.
Kevin and Farm Bureau. We're back into session. Representative Fritz, I saw your hand up there a while ago. I had to correct my mistake, but you're recognized now. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just offer, don't know that I completely agree with the not sound public policy thing. I appreciate your courage to stand up for the folks that you're working for and bring this bill in. I would just echo some of the things that Chairman Todd had mentioned. Very complex issue, but basically a thank you for bringing something complex to us, Chairman Howe.
Thank you.
Representative Travis.
And I too admire you for bringing this before this committee today. But I do have a question when I heard the man speak just a while ago that Atlanta is bringing their garbage up here. Do we not have enough garbage to take care of that in the state of Tennessee? I mean, we shouldn't bring garbage from other states to Tennessee to take care of. Or I'll say garbage just to be nice.
Chairman Howe.
I'm not terribly familiar with the operation. I have had, over a course of a year or two, year and a half, had conversations with people in that area. What I understand is that they're bringing Class A EQ biosolids, which is the highest grade that they have. It's my understanding that's what's being spread. Yet the people in my district are very concerned about this. I know that there is EPA, TDEC people on site quite regularly. And I know there's a lot of oversight, but again, I go back trying to serve my people and doing what they are asking me to do.
Chairman Todd, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. All in favor of sending House Bill 2299 to full committee, say aye. All opposed? No. Chairman
Abstain.
Howe, I love you, but no.
Well, it's just policy. I appreciate your help and thank you for letting me present the case.
Thank you so much for being here. Next on our list is Representative Fritz, but we have someone that's been waiting out there. Representative Pearson, you're not on the committee. We'll let you go next. Okay. As try to do this every time whenever we have somebody that's on the committee and someone's sitting out there, we try to bring them up so they don't have to sit there for the whole time. They may have lunch plans or whatever. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. You're properly before the committee. You're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Before you is House Bill 2343, the Environmental Project Notification Act. Before I continue, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request a roll call vote. And just thank you all, because this is actually my first bill that I am presenting here at the General Assembly. And to everyone, my entire family who's watching, my mom, my dad, brothers, nieces, nephews, District 86, thank you all for allowing me to serve you. My fiance who's here, Oshanae, thank you. My intern, Jermaine, Ian, thank you all for the opportunity to be of service. And I got to tell you, this is actually a simple bill. Y'all know we might disagree on a whole lot of things, a whole lot of times, but this bill simply will make information that's provided on the EPA's website as it relates to toxic release inventory facilities, information that's accessible on the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation's website. Most specifically, it amends Title 68, Chapter 101, and it says TDEC will create and maintain an informational tool on the department's website that provides data related to the presence of facilities that are required to submit toxic release inventory data to the Environmental Protection Agency pursuant to the Emergency Planning and Right to Know Act. This mechanism will be under Code 68, Title 68, Health, Safety, and Environmental Protection, and just adds a new section under Chapter 101 that codifies safety and environmental regulations. Simply stated, TDEC shall maintain this information to a publicly. It should be user-friendly and allow folks to look up the toxic release inventory facilities that are around their homes, construction sites, and receive notification if a project is coming down the pipe. The EPA, again, as I stated, has this information. It's a tool you could actually look up right now on its site, but we want to make it accessible to Tennesseans through the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, which for a lot of us is just a little bit more accessible. If you look up brownfields, it's almost exact same thing that we do with brownfields. Brownfields oftentimes regulated by state, but receive a lot of federal support. This would look very similarly to the brownfield site, so it would not change that in my life. I do a lot of work in environmental justice. All of us, including even hearing Chairman Howe say he wants to represent his district, we all care about clean water, clean soil, clean air for our communities. This would do nothing more than make sure that our folks in our districts would just have access to this information on TDEC's website. 1 out of 5 people in Tennessee, that's rural and urban areas, live near these types of facilities, and we just want to provide that information. Before I wrap up here, Mr. Chairman, I'll just read the fiscal note. It's not significant. It says this: the EPA, through its toxic release inventory program or data bank of toxic releases by businesses with certain industries, is already able to track the release of harmful chemicals using annual reports provided by such businesses. This tool, it's a multiple data tool, is free of charge, can be used to convey toxic release data. And for our purposes, TDEC can use such tools to meet the requirements of this legislation and update data for such tools utilizing existing staff. Therefore, this legislation will result in no significant impact to state government outside of just providing more accessibility and information to our districts and rural areas, which I represent in District 86, as well as many of you. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion and we'll answer any questions.
Okay. First on the list, we have Chairman Todd.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objections? Seeing none, take the roll, Mr. Clerk, because Representative Pearson asked for a roll call vote. Take
Thank
the
you,
roll.
Chairman.
Representative Darby, Representative Fritz, Chairman Grills,
No.
Representative Holsey, Representative Jones, Representative Reedy, Representative Shaw, Representative Todd, Representative Travis. Mr. Chairman, 5 ayes, 3 noes.
On the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Takes us back to Representative, while Chairman, Representative Fritz is going down there. Item number 2, rolled 1 week by Chairman Haston. Now we're on the tail end of our calendar, or the heel of our calendar once again. House Bill 2063 by Representative Fritz. We have a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I'm more comfortable looking at you than I'm sitting.
That's perfectly fine.
That's okay with y'all. And there's an amendment that makes the bill. It's drafting code 14295.
A motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor of putting the amendment on the bill, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment has been put on the bill. You're recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lots of clean air, clean water, and a clean soil discussion, and that's what I'm going to present to you today. This legislation simply amends, adds a new section of the Tennessee Air Quality Act prohibiting the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus into the atmosphere within the borders of our state for the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of solar radiation. Growing up, I would have never thought I'd had to come to y'all with a request to pass a law for this, but that is the world we live in. I would, Mr. Chairman, if it suits the committee, I know we have some folks that want to testify and we're running late. If you would.
That'd be great. Without objection, we'll go out of session. And we'll bring our witnesses forward. If you would, please state your name. You each have 3 minutes. Both of you are welcome to come and sit down. Push the little button in front of you. Make sure the red light comes on. And whenever the red light comes on, we'll start the timer. Or whenever you start talking, we'll start the timer. But you each have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Please state your name.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Dr. Denise Sibley. I'm an internal medicine physician from Johnson City, Tennessee. I've been treating patients for 35 years. I support this bill, and I refer to it as the Atmospheric Protection Act. Several states besides our own, including New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Kentucky, Connecticut, Iowa, and South Dakota, are involved in actions to protect their atmosphere as well. Cloud seeding has been recognized since 1965 in Maryland and 1967 in Pennsylvania, both in our own TCA 58-2-116, which specifically mentions legal weather modification in our state, and in the 44-page White House June 2023 congressionally mandated report regarding the framework for governmental past, present, and future weather modification through solar radiation modification using stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, and cirrus cloud thinning. There's no doubt that weather modification is taking place within our state. These actions of intentional manipulation of the atmosphere produce pollution and unintentional consequences that affect the health of our citizens, the safety of our water supply, our soil viability and crop production, the ecosystem survival, the precipitation extremes with flooding and drought, climate variability and extremes, and disruption of the economy. The spraying of sulfur dioxide is identified as causing acid rain, known to be detrimental to the health of humans, causing respiratory diseases such as asthma and worsening lung disease, as well as acidifying the water supply and soil. In addition, heavy metals have been detected in rainwater samples in Tennessee from 2017 from Clarksville, Tennessee, that contain dangerous substances such as strontium, barium, aluminum, and sulfur. And we are in the process of obtaining new water samples in our area in East Tennessee as well. We do not consent to this experimentation on our atmosphere and our citizens, nor the funding of such activities. We do not consent to the intentional blocking of the sun through the use of particulate aerosols and heavy metals. Blocking the sun would affect our crops with potential famine, deforestation, and blocking of vitamin D production by humans, which is a major determinant of our natural immunity. We do not consent of this unnatural, godlike desire to control the heavens. If we fail to block these actions with legislation by providing our own governance, then we will continue to be manipulated by the federal government and the stakeholders, in quotes, that are not named in the White House report, but they are mentioned. Scientific American in February 2023 also reported on the United Nations, quote, One Atmosphere Global Governance for the experimentation and deployment of solar geoengineering and solar radiation modification, which would link all world governments under singular control. I urge you to support our 9th and 10th amendments and to lead the nation as Tennessee forcefully says, no, not in this state. You won't mess with our atmosphere.
We're
Thank
running
you.
out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone being here today. And thank you so much for all the job that you all do all the time. My name is Dr. David Perry. I've been a licensed healthcare provider in Tennessee for 40 years. This is, as Dr. Sibley stated, a very important issue, particularly when it comes to people's health. And I wanted to echo basically the crop production is a big deal, and it's stated in this congressional mandated research that I believe everyone has a copy of. They mention also the acid, the ocean becoming an acid, type of environment, which would also affect obviously the land. But I wanted to address the vitamin D, and having gone on to PubMed, that's kind of the premier medical hub for information. And so one of their articles dated 2020, insufficient sun exposure has become a real health problem. The article states, studies in the past decade indicate that insufficient sun exposure may be responsible for 340,000 deaths in the United States, 480,000 deaths in Europe, and an incidence of increased amount of breast cancer, colorectal cancer, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's and autism, and also type 1 diabetes. Vitamin D has long been considered a principal mediator of beneficial effects of sun exposure. However, oral vitamin D supplementation has not been convincingly shown to prevent the above conditions. Thus, serum vitamin D as an indicator of health status basically shows that the effects of the sun outweigh basically taking a supplementation, although supplementation is obviously what you do if you can't get enough sun. And basically the article recommends that you at least try to get 5 to 30 minutes of sun exposure a day. And that, as we all saw with COVID, vitamin D, selenium, the calcium, and all those are key components. Going on to another article from PubMed dated September of 2023, the data strongly suggests that people that are in this state as well as across the United States need a minimum of or more than 50 nanograms per milliliter of vitamin D to prevent viral and bacterial infections, sepsis, and autoimmunity. Basically states further that you've got maintaining such concentrations in 97.5% of the people is achievable through daily safe sun exposure, and that supplements basically are kind of a resort as well, but that you're going to do way better if you have.
Yeah, we're running short on time there. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
And also Representative Fritz, you're on the committee. You're more than welcome to come up and ask questions as well. So just remember that. All right. Do we have any questions? Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Besides the vitamin D thing, what I've read is there's an increase in heavy metal toxicity in people in this country lately. The only way I know to get rid of that is with the EDTA, IV chelation is the only way I know to get rid of it. But I've always worried about the bee population disappearing. And do you think that this kind of activity, geoengineering, is leading the reason for that?
Yes, sir. I would say that it is absolutely the reason that the honeybees are going away is because of the, microcosm that they live in is affected by these aerosols. And basically the sulfur dioxide, the acid rain, it also impacts people with asthma. But yes, to answer your question. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions? Chairman Todd.
Thank you. It's been mentioned previously about chemtrails and, a natural occurrence that I've seen since, in my entire lifetime. I think when jets were invented, we started seeing chemtrails. It's a part of the fuel burning process, is my understanding. If you know something different, I'd love to know that. But also, as a follow-up to that, or second part of that, which is really the main point, do you know of specific instances, companies, entities that are utilizing this spraying of aerosols in our state right now?
You recognize whoever wants to answer it.
Yes, actually, it's mentioned in this report. So NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NASA, that would be one. The Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is OSTP. There's quite a few of them, actually. They have different planes that go to different heights in the stratosphere. Some are more like a crop dusting plane and some go very high. But NASA and NOAA are the main ones. They're also academic centers that have their own airplanes as well. So those are the ones I could mention right off the top of my head.
I want to jump in here. Will you refer to the report you're referring to?
Is this congressionally mandated research plan and an initial research governance framework related to solar radiation modification? It was produced by the White House in June of 2023. It's a 44-page document that I believe that you got a copy of that. And so I'm referring to everything in there that the stratospheric aerosol injection is talked about very widely in there.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Todd. You go ahead.
I haven't read that report yet, but does it say that this is a practice that, I mean, it's documented they've done it, or is it a concept that they're discussing in this
Well,
report?
Excuse me. I'm
You're fine.
supposed to
Y'all just go back and forth.
Excuse me. Yes, Chairman Todd. So they talk about past, present, and future. So I would say that they talk about risk versus risk, climate change versus risk of stratospheric radiation modification, solar radiation modification. And they also talk about modeling. So creating models in situ, that would be in the stratosphere, as well as computer modeling. But they do talk about all of those things, but they talk about past, present, and future.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Representative Fritz, do you have a question for the witnesses? Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sitting through the marathon of the committee we've had this morning as well. You can take your seats back and we'll go right back into session. Question's been called on the bill. Do you have a last statement there, Representative Fritz?
I'll take I will take a moment if you don't
Would that
mind.
be okay if I would like to let him make a last statement, then you call question. Okay. Okay. You're right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Shaw. Just, there is a widespread documentation of attempts to manage weather and manage climate, manage solar impact upon the earth with chemicals and compounds and apparatus. And simply the bill that you see in front of you today, I wanted to make sure that I say this before we vote, is something that I've worked closely with TDEC to pull together. And I know you've all read this, but it's a really simple one line: the intentional injection, release, or dispersion by any means of chemicals, chemical compound substances, or apparatus within the borders of this state into the atmosphere with the express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of sunlight is prohibited. And we just felt like that was a good place to drive the stake in the ground, that not in Tennessee. We're not going to do this. And we worded this, again, with TDEC's help, to make sure that we're not impacting legitimate industry within the state. And with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Fritz. Representative Jones, we'll let you ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing about the bill, Representative Fritz. I just want to mark for the record that I won't be voting for this bill. I looked up and I was trying to research as we were going through this, and it seems like a lot of this is based on conspiracy theories. Most newspapers have said this is a conspiracy theory, and sometimes I'm sitting on this committee and thinking, have we lost reality? So I won't be supporting this. I just want to put on the record why. Thank you for explaining it. But if you research any regular news station, they say that this is false. And multiple scientists have come out to say, and pilots have come out to say this is false. So I just can't support your legislation.
Thank you, Representative Fritz. You recognize.
Thank you, Representative Jones. I appreciate that. Done a little bit more research before coming to committee. You would have seen that the whitehouse.gov document is indeed real. And I sometimes think that some things that happen in the White House these days are surreal myself. So I would just offer that I appreciate your comment, but unfortunately, it is a wild thing, but I think it is real. And I think that what we've done here is a very measured approach of just saying not in Tennessee. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Question's been called on the bill. Representative Shaw, all in favor of sending House Bill 2063 to full committee, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
Thank
We
you,
have,
Chairman.
if you wish to be a no, be recognized by the clerk. Ayes have it on the full committee. Thank you all so much for being here today, and all of our guests for watching. We will see you next week if we can get a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.